We build giant corporate and government entities powered by vast amounts of personal information and expect them to be transparent machines, making our lives safer and easier.
Daniel Holtzclaw, the shocking facts the anti-cop media doesn't want you to know. Welcome to the Shakaama Live Show with your host, Shakaama. I apologize if you just heard that. Me hitting the mic. Let's make a bet. No, I'm a betting man. I live in Las Vegas. I bet by the end of this video, all of you listening to me, even if you're a staunch Black Lives Matter cheerleader, paid for by Soros himself, that I'm going to make you feel sorry for a cop. And by the end of the video, you'll be marching in the streets for him to be set free. What would you say if I told you there was a conspiracy where cops were running around, raping little girls, someone witnessed it, and tries to rat the police out, only the police take the complaint and pin it on the one good cop on the force? You'd probably say that's terrible, right? What would you say if I told you there was a conspiracy where cops were doing absolutely nothing? No one was getting raped at all. But they took the one good cop on the force and they pinned about a dozen rapes that never happened on him. You'd probably ask, how would that work? This is a curious case of Daniel Holtzclaw. Oklahoma City. Did you know they have black people there? Oh, it's not so much as Mississippi, but they have a few. Let's dial back to let's dial back the time machine to the summer where a young teen was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri. There was high racial tensions, egged on by George Soros and the KKK. The KKK was bust into the small town of Ferguson and started burning buildings, including the church of the father of Michael Brown. Apparently, the father had a personal beef with the local police, and the police one-upped him by having the KKK burn down his church. Oh, the tangled web we weave. I'm sure you knew that family was not as innocent as it was portrayed in the media. And of course, my name is Justice and Truth. And of course, I'm always going to tell you the truth. In the steps of George Soros and Acorn, they captured a few of the local black residents of Ferguson and trained them to be professional agitators. Based on that training, the local residents birthed Black Lives Matter. What started out of frustration then blossomed into a national, nearly all-white movement with the comical name of Black Lives Matter. You did know that it was almost all white. It's like 75%, 80% white. We just don't have the numbers. People, I know you forget that. Step over the Oklahoma. They didn't want the KKK, and now the Black Lives Matter to be chasing and clashing in the streets. So they thought a fantastic scheme: prosecute a policeman, throw the book at him, and make sure all of the alleged victims were black and female. The fact that they were all ex-con, the crackheads, that didn't matter. In steps a female internal investigator, so inept that she didn't even record victim interviews. And you have a tsunami of corruption run rampant. So bad was the corruption that when the dust settled, they sentenced Daniel Holtzclaw to 263 years in prison. And by the way, for those of you keeping score at home, you can't sentence someone to 263 years in prison. In the United States, under our Constitution, you cannot sentence someone to 263 years. So what's going on here? Headlines are going on here. Money is going on here. And apparently, there's black, white, and all sorts of other cops forcing street hood rats into doing something in their mouth. What's that? You didn't catch that? Yes. Other than one lying ex-con, nearly all of the other accusers claimed a cop with different descriptions forced them into sexual acts at gunpoint. How bad are the descriptions that the cop targeted Daniel Holtzclaw with? Blonde, short, fat, black. Daniel Holtzclaw is a tall, I believe 6'4", 6'5", something like that, bodybuilder with jet black hair. Do you see how crazy this is? That the investigators still went forward? How corrupt do you have to be to accuse a half-Japanese guy when the accusers said it was a black guy? Several accusers said he unzipped his pants and pulled out his penis right out of his uniform and stuck it in their mouth. Well, Mr. Bodybuilder Daniel Holtzclaw wears compression underwear, which I wear sometimes, and body armor that covers his pelvis. He can't unzip his pants, nor can he pull his penis out. He would literally have to get fully undressed and stand there buck naked in the middle of the street to get to his penis. You smell corruption here? Not only that, but when they ask for his uniform to test it, it's on video of him getting undressed to show, in fact, that's exactly how he's dressed. But investigators still went forward with bringing charges against him. I claim that from the mayor, city council, district attorney, public defender's office, and everyone from the chief on down in the police department should all have criminal charges brought against them. Black Lives Matter, of course, got wind of this and forced their way into the trial and would follow the jurors around to the bathrooms to take pictures of them, which is known as jury tampering and jury intimidation. That's federal. That's FBI. Guess who was among them intimidating the jury? One of the accusers, the main one. It seemed like a slam dunk case against a perverted policeman. Daniel Holtzclaw was accused and convicted of sexually assaulting multiple women while on duty. In August of 2014, Holtzclaw was charged with 36 felony counts of R-word, sexual battery, indecent exposure, and forcibly oral sodomy of 13 women. Came forward to accuse him of assaulting them while they were in his custody. And let me just edit this right here. They did not accuse him. They were brought in, questioned, and they said a black guy, a blonde guy, a white guy, this guy, a fat guy, a short guy. And the investigators, the internal affairs, took their testimony and placed it upon Daniel Holtzclaw. Do you see how this is working out here? Daniel Holtzclaw was found guilty of 18 counts of sex crimes in December 10th of 2015. The jury recommended a sentence of 263 years in prison. On January 20, 2016, the day Holtzclaw was to be formally sentenced, his defense attorney filed a motion for a new trial. His inept defense attorney, claiming Holtzclaw was denied a fair trial. Or this is the new defense attorney. The public defender was inept. The judge then denied the motion for a new trial after multiple victims read statements in court. The judge sentenced Holtzclaw to serve 263 years in prison to be served consecutively, which he cannot do, and he knows it if he's an actual judge. I think the judge should be investigated just based on that by itself. You don't even have to investigate his collusion in this travesty, in this conspiracy. That he would read off, yes, you're going to serve 263 years in prison, means he's not a judge. He's something else. I don't know what he is. He's somebody, I don't know where he came from. Crackerjack box? Daniel Holtzclaw has always maintained he's not a sex predator. Prosecutors are convinced that Daniel Holtzclaw used his badge as power to humiliate and sexually assault his victims. However, Holtzclaw and his family says he's not only innocent, he's being railroaded. Now that we're here and we've heard of both sides in the Daniel Holtzclaw case, they brought a legal team. Nancy Grace, criminal defense attorney Mark Eglarsh, to break down the case. Now I present to you the special investigator for the defense of Daniel Holtzclaw. And here it is. The Daniel Holtzclaw allegations, investigation, and trial. A closer look. January 24, 2016, updated March 15, 2016, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, by Brian Bates. On January 20, now Brian Bates can be seen in Michelle Malkin's investigation of this case also. On January 21, 2016, former Oklahoma City police officer Daniel Holtzclaw, 29. Oh, one of the people said that the guy was 50 years old. One of the accusers said he was 50 years, no, not one. Several said he was 50 years old and white and blonde. But apparently an internal affair doesn't want to go to the police department and say, hey, y'all got a 50-year-old blonde white guy here working here? Yeah, maybe we need to look into that guy. No, they instead targeted Daniel Holtzclaw, the Japanese bodybuilder, 29-year-old. I think he was 27 when it was all started. He was sentenced to 263 years in prison after the Oklahoma City jury found him guilty of 18 sexual assault-related crimes against 8 female accusers. Holtzclaw was acquitted of 18 other sexual assault-related crimes against an additional 5 female accusers. Why? Because they were so ridiculous that they completely dismissed them out of hand. But they brought them to court. They brought them to court, ladies and gentlemen. They were so ridiculous that they just dismissed it out of, didn't even consider it, but they brought them to court. What does that mean? They were just hoping. They were hoping. They were like, well, I know this is retarded, but we're going to bring this to court anyway. What comes next, says I'm continuing his declaration. What comes next, I've written and rewritten dozens of times in an attempt to accurately, concisely, and fairly portray what I personally witnessed in regards to this investigation and trial. Before I give you my opinion of Daniel Holtzclaw's guilt or innocence, I want to qualify that opinion. But more than that, I want to provide insights to this case that were never reported and never considered by a public that has been all too eager to redefine Daniel Holtzclaw as the poster child for decades of abuse against minorities, in particular black females, by those with not only the ability to do so, but presumably an almost unquestionable authority to do so. The black female is not targeted. The black female is not a victim. The black man is the victim. Anybody telling you that the black female has some sort of victim card that she can pull out and say, look, we have a historical... No. This is what feminists tell black women. Oh, you're a victim. No. You black females out there, stand up and say, no, not me. My husband, my brother, my father. Those are the victims. I'm not a victim. I'm protected by those guys. It's you who are victimizing me and trying to tell me to go against my black brother, my black nephew, my black cousin. You lay them down in the streets of Las Vegas in 140-degree weather with the asphalt being close to 200 degrees and stomp on their face. They raise up and they have skin peel off of their face. That doesn't happen to black females. Anybody saying so is a liar. Anybody claiming that the black woman is some sort of victim is a liar. The victim is the black man. The violence happens against the black man. The injustice happens against the black man. And I wanted to say before I let off in this entire thing, I think the general population has no idea what goes on in the legal justice system. Point blank, they send people to prison for no apparent reason. Oh, you said, oh, that's not possible. That's improbable. Well, if you spend 2 seconds looking at it, you'll see that there are plenty of people in prison for a long time, for years, sentenced to years. It's not even the person, and they know it's not the person. How about that one? And I've had police say, he's not guilty of this, but he's guilty of something, so we're going to make this stick. Let me reiterate that for you. We know that Tyrone didn't rob the convenience store. Was a convenience store robbed? We don't care. But we're going to make it stick anyway, because black men should be off the streets. Have you all heard the national chief, whatever, the highway chief, when he says, I would rather all black men be off the streets, meaning put in jail? Now, I'm not with Black Lives Matter. I'm against Black Lives Matter. But injustice, I will not tolerate. Lying and deceit, I will not tolerate. Our justice system isn't a joke. It's a very dangerous, systematic pile of corruption and feces sitting in our population. And of course, the mayor and the city council knows it. The DA knows it. The public defender's office knows it. Daniel Holtzclaw got one visit. One. How do you get one visit from your attorney when you're charging multiple? The sheer number alone should necessitate about 200 visits just to make sure you got it down, right? One visit. Let me continue. In this article, I intentionally stay away from theories, race, background, jury, makeup, influence, and the whys, except where evidentiary. I want to limit this article to just the facts and present in an open court. Not long after Daniel Holtzclaw was arrested and criminally charged, I was called and asked to be his defense lawyer, Scott Adams, to take a look at this case and give my opinion. That conversation was something like this. Telephone call. Scott Adams, defense lawyer. So how badly have you roasted my client on your website? Brian Bates. Actually, I haven't yet. I was waiting for some of the details, but it's coming. Scott Adams. I'm sure it is. Before you do that, I'd like to ask you to look over some of this evidence and give me your gut reaction. My guy claims he's completely innocent, but you know how that goes. You may know some of these women, and you may be able to give us some insights as to why they'd make these accusations if they are not true. Now, okay, let me continue with the quote. Or maybe my guy's guilty, and you can convince me of that. In that case, I may need to focus on the plea. I'm telling you stuff that's hindsight. These guys don't know all of this evidence. In fact, the evidence of the video and all of this sort of stuff and the actual conversations that the police had with the quote-unquote victims came out when Michelle Malkin investigated this. Even at the trial, they still did not know that all of these women had lied. Not that the women had lied, but they had pinned it on Daniel Holtzclaw, which I keep saying, this is corruption. The women said a fat black guy, a short white guy, an old white guy harassed me, did stuff to me, held me at gunpoint. And the police took that and pinned it on Daniel Holtzclaw. For you people who literally think that our justice system has anything to do with justice, you're a joke of a human being. Let's continue on. Scott Adams. No, that was his quote. Okay, here's back to Mr. Bates. I've known Mr. Adams both personally and professionally for several years. I've worked directly and indirectly on many of his cases. I first met Mr. Adams when I hired him in 2005 to successfully represent me when I faced false accusations by multiple female accusers and the wrath of Oklahoma City Police Vice Lieutenant Doug Kimberlin and then Oklahoma County District Attorney Wes Lane, both of whom cared very little about the truth. And speaking of that, the DA presented stuff and actually lied to the jury in a court of law. Do you see why I say everybody needs to be prosecuted in this case? Lied to the jury. Lie. We have evidence of Holtzclaw actually being there. Like out and out lie. I'm not talking about it was a gray area and he out and out lied. Truth. In the end, my female accusers were shown to be liars and charges were all dismissed. That experience and the work I did on my own case convinced me to become a licensed armed private investigator. Now, I just saw a case. Who was this? Just saw a case. Was it an athlete or it was a movie star. The guy from the black guy. Who was it? Movie star. He was accused, blah, 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 multiple charges, so forth and so on. Finally found completely innocent. Nobody will touch him anyway. The accusation ruins you. The accusation in the United States of America ruins you. You all still think OJ's guilty. The evidence shows he's not, that he was completely incapable of doing it, but you idiots still think he does it, that he did it. Till this day, you will go to your grave thinking he did it. The accusation alone is what you stand on. Michael Jackson proved beyond a shadow of a doubt in a court of law he never did anything to anybody. The fact that a parent would say, I'll take money, should clue you in that the accusation was not proper. Woman accuses football player in high school of raping her. Gets $1 million. He goes to jail. 2 years later, she texts her friend, I made the whole thing up. I made the entire thing up. Made it up. I think he went to my house once. I don't think I've ever been even near him. He was a star football player. I was a hood rat. We really never really interacted. I made the whole thing up. He's freed. He can't go to the NFL. And she spent all $1 million there trying to come after her. But it didn't make national news when she said I made the whole thing up. But it made national news when she accused him. The accusation alone. There should be a law, criminal charges, when you accuse somebody that you go to jail if it is found that the accusation alone is a lie. You all don't want me to be a judge. You definitely don't want me to be a president. I'm about justice, and justice is harsh. Let's continue on. After looking over the evidence available at the time, I told Mr. Adams I did not believe there was anything at this point proving Daniel Holtzclaw had committed any crime. In fact, I agreed to Mr. Adams that much of the investigation seemed premature based on biased and greatly flawed. My next step was to meet with Daniel Holtzclaw in person. Now, I have not personally met with Mr. Daniel Holtzclaw, but my observation is that they have broken him psychologically. I want you to go watch a video of them at the trial reading off the sentencing and saying that he's guilty. I want you to notice that he's holding himself, he's crying, he has his head down, and he's rocking back and forth. That is a destroyed mind. And of course, it stands to reason if somebody reads off, you are hereby sentenced to 263 years in prison, that it would break you psychologically. How even worse would it be when you know that you're innocent and you're found guilty and sentenced to 263 years in prison? When the lady accused the black guy in the 50s of doing whatever to her, raping her, and then when forensic evidence came out and said this proves that this black man was 16 miles away from the scene of the crime and that you made this all up to accuse this man, and he gets out after 40 years in jail, and she says, oh wow, oh my God, you should be put to death. You should be put to death. You should be put to death. I say that's death penalty. Why? Because that's a death penalty to most people, because most people don't have 40 years in them. How many people do you know, if you said you're sentenced to 40 years right now, would be dead in 20, in 10, in 5? No, I'm not talking about the sentencing. I'm talking about in their normal life. They only have 5 years in them anyway. They only have 10 years in them anyway. They don't have 40 years. 40 years is a death sentence. But he bided his time, and I look down upon him for this one thing. He comes out after 40 years, hugs her, and says, I forgive you. It's my Christian. Go to hell. Your mind is so twisted, you don't even know when you need to stand up for yourself. This is a black thing. Of course the guy's black and the woman's white. Of course, because black people in this country are pathetic. Pathetic. And when you say, hey, you're pathetic, they go, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I believe in God. What has he done for you? What? He wakes me up in the morning. No, he doesn't wake you up in the morning. He does not. You wake up because you wake up. He's guiding me in my path. He's guided your path to destruction? Economic downfall? Your entire population is at the bottom of everything? He's blessed me. He means so much. You're not blessed. That is the exact opposite of blessed. You're pathetic. You're pathetic. Black Lives Matter is not your friend. Obama was not your friend. The Democrats are not your friend. You're pathetic. You are brainwashed. And let's talk about religion for a second. If you are praising a God, worshiping a God and you are living in the state that you're living, that your entire community is completely downtrodden, wouldn't the logical person say, well, I think I'm pretty sure I'm worshiping the wrong God. I'm here to tell you you're worshiping the wrong God. A God is supposed to be bountiful, fruits, plenty, all that sort of stuff. And all of that is in the Bible. For who? For the Jews. Seems like the Jews are profiting. Seems like the Jews are exactly worshiping the right God. I have a proposition. You're worshiping the wrong God. Your God is hundreds of thousands of years older than this Jesus fella. And so we'll look at Africa. Look at Africa. I've been to Africa. There's cities of gold in Africa. And it's not by the white guy. Not by the white man. They're rich. They're the richest people in the world. And then I get the socialists and the communists come to me and say, that's because you're working on the backs of, no, they're not working on the backs of anybody. Nigeria got to be number one economically because they have a vast and wide economy in business and entertainment. They have Nollywood, Nigeria Hollywood. Over in the East, in Kenya and stuff, they have the same thing. I forget what it's called. Something like Hollywood or whatever they named it. I don't know why they have to use the word Hollywood. Vast. Electronics. They have cars that they make themselves. Apparently you all are worshiping the wrong God. Your God is supposed to smite people that come against you, right? Right? That's what it says, right? I'm sorry Farrakhan isn't telling you this. I'm sorry Jesse Jackson isn't telling you this. The only reason I'm bringing any of this up is because Black Lives Matter is involved all up in this. And the new Panther Party, which I spit on. The new Panther Party. Did you investigate anything first? Did you actually take a look? If you're going to be an organized group, wouldn't it behoove you to actually vet some of the information? And you should be the first one to say, hey, y'all hood rats are liars. We're not going to be a part of this. And what did they? Of course, they immediately turned around and started suing the city to get millions of dollars. Continuing on. Unlikeliest of allies. Upon meeting Daniel Holtzclaw for the very first time in Mr. Adams' office while he was out of jail and on bond, his first words to me were, they taught us about you in the police academy. An unflattering reference to my nearly 20-year of high-profile activism spotlighting street prostitution and human trafficking in Oklahoma City through my website, John TV, and numerous local, national, and international television appearances. Activism that often has me harshly criticizing police and the Oklahoma City District Attorney Office. Daniel Holtzclaw was over 6 feet tall, 270 pounds, and had the air of self-confidence that often comes with such a massive physical physique, a badge, a gun, and all the authority granted to law enforcement. To be honest, upon first glance, Daniel Holtzclaw embodied just about every negative stereotype of a police officer that I held. He was white. That's not true. He obviously spent a lot of time at the gym. He was cocky, and in his mind, the end justifies the means when you're a police officer protecting the citizens from the scum of the city. And I already told you that, I'm going to get to that in a second. But he's not the type of police that end justifies means. He's the exact opposite. The citizen needs a break. That's who they're trying to pin all this stuff on. That's what these hood rats targeted. When the hood rats got on board with the whole scam, this is who they targeted. The guy that let the woman off at the stop. Oh my God. Billy Bob, he let me off. He's probably the best cop I've ever met. That's the guy that they're targeting. Let's continue on. But as I spent those first few hours going over the case thus far with Daniel Holtzclaw, I realized something far more important. Daniel Holtzclaw truly believed in his innocence, and in the judicial system he placed his life on the line every day to protect. I've worked with many cases with truly guilty sexual assault predators. In all of those cases, there was this inexplicable sense of doubt about hearing their version of events and the involuntary feeling of the hairs beginning to stand up on the back of my neck simply by being in the same room with them. That never once happened in any of the interactions with Daniel Holtzclaw. After meeting with Mr. Adams, then with Daniel, and finally with Daniel's father, Eric Holtzclaw, who was a lieutenant with another police agency in another city, I was asked to officially assist in Daniel's defense. So here's a guy who not prosecuted, but came against police time and time again due to him being called in when it's some sort of police corruption or something like that, right? Some police sort of action against a citizen. So now this guy, this very same guy, is asked to be defense of Daniel Holtzclaw. Do I think Daniel Holtzclaw is guilty or innocent? Since I was asked to be part of the Daniel Holtzclaw defense team, I spent literally hundreds of hours with Daniel, his father, his mother, his sisters, his friends, and his girlfriend. Let me stop right there. Did you hear what he just said? I have spent literally hundreds of hours. The defense attorney spent one visit with him. That's it. That's crazy. More importantly, I've read, watched, and listened to every piece of evidence and potential evidence in the case. I also visited each and every alleged crime scene on multiple occasions. And I did so with the understanding that if at any time it became clear Daniel Holtzclaw was guilty of even just a single crime, that I would bow out of the case. The fact that I assisted in this case through the entire trial and literally sat with Daniel Holtzclaw in his jail cell until only an hour before his guilty verdict was announced should make my opinion crystal clear. I do not believe Daniel Holtzclaw is guilty of the crimes he was charged with and later convicted of. Brian Bates. Do I know with 100% certainty that Daniel Holtzclaw is innocent? No, the only person that knows that are Daniel and his accusers. What I do know is that the allegations against Daniel Holtzclaw are highly suspect in the investigation, prosecution, and trial were far from what was depicted by the local, national, and international media. My critics will say that, why, of course you think he's innocent. You were hired to be a part of his defense team. You are biased. I do not hold that opinion against my critics. I am most certainly biased. But that bias was not created as a result of blindly supporting Daniel Holtzclaw. My bias is a direct result of reviewing every piece of evidence in the case. My bias is also formed by many aspects of this case that should trouble every citizen that could one day find themselves or a loved one in the crosshairs of a judicial system that is being pushed along by a public hell bent on convicting a man with such questionable evidence. Regardless of bias, because we are all guilty of having one, that doesn't change these concerning facts. No prior history. Daniel has not a single moment in his past that supports the assertion he is a racist or is an abuser of women to any degree, sexual, physical, emotional, or otherwise. Investigators went to Daniel's hometown of Enid, his college town just outside of Detroit, and everywhere in between, looking for anyone who would cast a shadow over Daniel's character. Try as they might, they couldn't. Not a single ex-girlfriend, not a single classmate, not a single coworker, not even an acquaintance. Nobody would say Daniel was anything but quiet, respectful, kind, and focused on his girlfriend, career, and his physique. Prosecutors went so far as to send investigators to the gym where Daniel and his girlfriend worked out, specifically to try and prove he was cheating on her. A witch hunt that proved to be completely untrue, but is a common tactic of immoral prosecutors and investigators. You want to put pressure on a defendant, cause turmoil on their support system. You see, Daniel's girlfriend wasn't just a supporter of Daniel, she was also the sister of a prosecutor in the very office that was seeking to imprison Daniel for life. This reality enraged the prosecution, so much so, lead prosecutor Galen Geiger could not contain his hatred during Daniel's girlfriend's cross-examination, going so far as to admit to the jury he was being unnecessarily crude with her. Deemed a serial rapist from a single complaint. Within 24 hours of the initial complaint, investigators immediately determined Daniel was a serial predator who targeted black females with a past history of drugs and prostitution. Yet, at that point, police had only identified one accuser, Janie Liggins, and she didn't even fit the profile. Liggins had no history of drug addiction or prostitution. Despite that fact, the investigation moved forward with their assumption and never once approached any woman that did not fit that predetermined profile. While all but three of Daniel's accusers had to be sought out, Morris, Liggins, and Hales, only black females were pursued by investigators. The interrogation. When Daniel was confronted by investigators within hours of Janie Liggins' allegation, he was completely open and cooperative. He never tried to lawyer up, repeatedly expressed his desires to cooperate, offered to take a polygraph, signed waivers allowing investigations to take his DNA, his uniform, search his phone, private vehicles, and apartment. Even when confronted with the fact that the investigators had surveillance video of the Liggins traffic stop, Daniel's version of events never wavered and matched the video and physical evidence exactly. No need to search. Even though Daniel consented to allow investigators access to all of his clothing, personal vehicles, personal cell phone, computers, and apartment, they never chose to exercise those options. When Daniel turned over his uniform during his interrogation, seasoned sex crime investigators felt there was no need to take Daniel's underwear into custody for testing, even though he had allegedly committed a R-word only hours before. Additionally, these same seasoned investigators never searched his personal vehicle, never searched his cell phone, and never searched his apartment or personal computers. They didn't even request his additional uniform shirts and pants that were hanging in the closet and laying in his dirty clothes. GPS evidence. Investigators and the public have made a huge issue out of a GPS, referred to AVL, automatic vehicle location, evidence as proof Daniel assaulted his accusers. In reality, the AVL is only useful in a criminal proceeding in two applications. One, if Daniel denied coming into contact with any of the accusers, which he does not. Two, if the AVL shows discrepancy in the assertion by Daniel's accuser, which it does. Despite what was reported by the media in several instances, the AVL data directly discredits the allegations of Daniel's accusers. In one instance, an accuser says she was taken to an abandoned schoolyard, removed from Daniel's patrol vehicle, bent over, and R-word for 10 minutes. Daniel's AVL clearly shows he only drove past the schoolyard, never stopped, never drove slower than 2 miles per hour, and was only briefly in the area. In another instance, an accuser claims Daniel followed her home, parked in her front driveway, told her to get into his patrol car, and that he then made 3 right turns before pulling over, removing her from his patrol, and R-word. Daniel's AVL clearly shows he never even drove down her street. The AVL proves Daniel was doing his job, patrolling his designated area, and coming into contact with the citizens in that area. As point out of the Daniel's attorneys, the hardest lie to uncover is one that is inserted into a very real story. If AVL is proof of sexual assault, then every police officer is open to a similar accusation by anyone they come in contact with while on patrol. So many accusers, investigators, and the public frequently point out the sheer number of similar accusers who all had seemingly similar accusations. This seems pretty damning on the surface and was exploited to the fullest in the local and national media headlines. However, does this remind you of anything? The similarities lose their punch when you realize the only reason the accusers have the same profile, black females with a history of drugs and prostitution, is because those are the only people investigators went out looking for. Additionally, as supported by the audio recording and the police reports of those interviews, investigators told the women up front, and even told their family members and loved ones, that they believe they may be a victim of a sexual assault perpetrated by a police officer they had contact with in the past. This even after all the allegations against Daniel and his face had been shown on the news. If you only interview who fit the particular profile that you completely made up, and you tell them up front what type of information you're looking for, inappropriate sexual contract, then you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Investigators and the prosecution knew a case was only strong if they piled on victims, even if those victims' allegations were proven to be lies, even if he didn't rape nobody. Investigators, and even Oklahoma City's District Attorney David Prater, would have you believe that the only reason 18 of the counts and 5 of the accusers' assertions were denied by the jury was because there simply wasn't enough evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but that those women were victims nonetheless. That assertion is misleading and untrue. In reality, the evidence for all of the accusations by all of the accusers was the same. They came in contact with Daniel while he was on patrol and committed the sexual assault upon them. No independent third-party eyewitness, no direct evidence in support of the criminal charge. The accusers were denied their assertions were done so because they were proven to be liars by the defense. Take the example of one of the most high-profile accusers, Sardrienne Hill. Her story has been retold hundreds of times by the media, even after Daniel was acquitted of all of her allegations. It's pretty damning stuff. Daniel allegedly sexually assaulted Hill while she was high and handcuffed to a hospital bed. Days later, he friends her on Facebook. He engages her in a direct message and phone calls. Daniel even admits to going over to her house, where Hill claims she was assaulted again. Yet all of the charges, 6 total, Daniel was acquitted of. Why? Because she lied. Hill's accounts of being an R-word in the recovery room of a busy hospital emergency department is ludicrous. When confronted with the reality that none of her Facebook conversations with Daniel contained even a hint of sexual contact, consensual or otherwise, she claimed under oath that he knew better than to put it onto writing and only talked inappropriately to her during their phone calls. However, phone records clearly show the phone calls were limited to 2 5-second calls, most likely never answered by the other party. The bombshell came when I located a video and audio recording interview with Hill. After the interview was over, Hill was outside the interview room, standing in the hall. She made this statement she didn't know would be recorded. Is this good evidence? Even if he didn't rape nobody, he's still getting in contact with people he's arrested. Investigative coercion. Investigators clearly coerced women into becoming victims and making allegations against Daniel. 2 strikes examples of these were accusers Terry Morrison, Carla Raines. Morris insisted that she was attacked by Daniel while on foot and en route to the homeless shelter in downtown Oklahoma City. Morris stated that Daniel was driving an older model police car. Morris was also shown a photo lineup containing Daniel's photo. The problem is, Morris' assertion are that Daniel didn't patrol near the homeless shelter. His AVL never showed him by the homeless shelter. He was driving a new model patrol car during this time, and Morris picked out a different police officer in the photo lineup as her most likely attacker. Those facts didn't dissuade Detective Rocky Gregory from spoon-feeding Morris details about a new time frame and a location to her assault, intentionally making it matching existing AVL records for Daniel. Morris initially resisted Detective Gregory's attempts to get her to change her story. Only after she was arrested and sitting in jail on an unrelated charge did she contact Detective Gregory and change her story to match the one that he had suggested. Daniel was acquitted of her allegations. Carla Raines was also approached by Detective Gregory. Raines spent the first several minutes of her interview denying ever having any inappropriate contact with any police officer. However, she did admit the only officer she had contact with in the past year was Daniel, though she didn't identify him by name. Only after several minutes of persuading Raines to declare herself a victim, after referring to Daniels as a really bad guy with lots of victims, did she take the bait and implicate Daniel. Detective Gregory never noted in his official police report that Raines had denied being a victim. When asked at the trial if her denial was significant and should have been noted in the official record, Gregory said no. Defense attorney Scott Adams told the jury that Detective Gregory either had an agenda or was incompetent. Daniel was acquitted of her allegations. DNA evidence. Much has been made about the case involving the only minor to make allegations against Daniel. I'm going to refer to her as AG because she was only 17 at the time and had not publicly disclosed her identity outside the court. AG was the only accuser where DNA evidence was discovered. The media and the prosecution played up the fact that AG's DNA was found on Daniel's uniform pants, on the outside and inside of the fly, to be exact. In all honesty, that's all most people had to hear to determine Daniel was guilty in their minds. I have to admit, I thought it was pretty compelling evidence at first, too. However, the police department's own DNA expert made it clear the DNA was speculative at best. Under oath, the prosecution expert admitted that she never tested for vaginal fluid, semen, or saliva. She never even fluoresced Daniel's uniform pants for any indicators of fluids. She only tested for common skin cells and only tested the flies of Daniel's pants. The prosecution DNA expert confirmed at trial that they had no way of telling from what part of AG's body the DNA came from. How is it going on? How it got on Daniel's pants, or even if AG actually ever made physical contact with Daniel's pants. The prosecution expert agreed that the AG's DNA could have been transferred to Daniel's pants via secondary transfer, meaning Daniel could have gotten AG's DNA on his hand when he either pat searched her or was searching through her purse, then transferring that DNA to his pants via his own hands while going to the restroom, adjusting himself, or simply tucking his shirt in. It's also important to note that Daniel allegedly R-worded two other women within hours of AG's rape, and those women's DNA was not located on Daniel's uniform. Not only is the DNA evidence in AG's accusation not conclusive in any way, AG's own mother reported to an investigator that AG's only response to her on the night of the alleged R-word was that she met a hot cop. AG's mother had also filed a missing persons report on her daughter earlier that day and signed a battery complaint against her for punching her in the face. At trial, AG's mother denied the hot cop comment, even though her interview was recorded and played back to her. The mother even denied signing an assault complaint against AG, even though she signed complaint was presented at trial. For those who don't understand the DNA thing, they only found skin cells. Skin cells, for those of you who don't understand, can be transferred anyway. The dust in your house is your skin cells. Your skin constantly renews itself and the dead skin falls off. If one human comes in contact with another human's skin, it gets on their hand. And then if you ever do anything with your hands, say go to the bathroom, that skin from the other person can be on your clothes. And this is exactly what they were saying. They admitted that they did not, in fact, test any other article of clothing nor anywhere else for any other DNA evidence for any skin cells. So literally, it could be third-party skin cells. This is not evidence of anything happening. My rapist was a short, black man. I've given examples about where 3 of Daniel's defense accusers were shown to be liars, and he was acquitted of their allegations. In addition, there were 2 more accusers who were also shown to have given false, inconsistent, or unbelievable testimony, and Daniel was also acquitted of all of their allegations. Carla Raines and Florine Mathis. This fact may cause many to feel that the justice and jury systems fulfilled their role and weeded out the truth from fiction. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I'll make that point with this single last example. Accuser, now officially a victim, Sherry Ellis, claims that she was forced to perform oral sex on Daniel after he stopped her and fondled her breast, buttocks, and vagina. Ellis then claims that Daniel drove her to an abandoned schoolyard, removed her from his patrol car, had her bend over, and vaginally R-word her from approximately 10 minutes before letting her simply walk away. Sounds pretty horrific, doesn't it? And the jury believed it and convicted Daniel of the charge related to her allegations. 2 counts of sexual battery, forced oral sodomy, and R-word in the first degree. But Here's what you probably never heard reported by the media. Ellis literally couldn't recognize or point out Daniel as her attacker at the preliminary hearing. Ellis was the only accuser not to be asked by prosecutors to point out her attacker at trial because of her inability at the previous hearing. AVL GPS evidence from Daniel's patrol car does indeed show him traveling to the abandoned schoolyard. However, the AVL device records an officer's speed and it never shows him driving slower than 2 miles per hour, let alone stopping for 10 minutes to do anything. And lastly, the most likely reason Ellis couldn't pick out her attacker in the courtroom is because she told investigators and testified at trial that her attacker was an officer that is routinely patrol her neighborhood and that he is a short, black male. In contrast, Daniel is over 6 feet tall and pale. Despite all of these flaws in Ellis' allegation, Daniel was convicted of crimes against her. If it's so clear to me that Daniel is most likely innocent and that reasonable doubt abounds in this case, then why was he convicted? I still wrestle with that fact. That is one of the reasons I held back from reporting on Daniel's case at all, until after his sentencing and after I had a chance to process everything that I witnessed. My professional obligation to Daniel as a part of his defense team has ended, but my support for his innocence and my determination to expose the injustice of his investigation and prosecutions are unwavering. I literally just left Daniel as he paces in the cold floor on the top floor of the Oklahoma County Jail. Daniel waits as he is set to be transferred into the prison system in Lexington in less than 24 hours, where he will be profiled by other inmates and guards as a former gang officer who used his badge to commit horrific acts against minority women, who most likely have direct ties to inmates in whatever facility Daniel will eventually be housed, most likely for the rest of his life, right? If you are one of those who wished unimaginable harm upon Daniel, your desires will most assuredly be Daniel's reality, a reality that could befall you or anyone you loved. In summary, I worked on this case for countless hours, while nobody outside of Daniel and his accusers can definitively say what these crimes did or did not happen. I can say with 100% confidence justice was not served and that Daniel was not proven to be guilty of a single crime. What happened in the courtroom should cause everyone to fear the jury system as we know it and remind the citizens that prosecutors are not seekers of justice. They prosecute. That's all they know, and they often do it regardless of the truth. Daniel did not choose the perfect victims. I submit to you that prosecutors picked the perfect accusers. I believe that Daniel to be an innocent man and Daniel's story should be told. Note, there's much more that casts doubt on Daniel's guilt and points to a flaw in investigation. In this article, I intentionally stand out of the race issue beyond what was directly evidentiary in nature. I also stayed away from the victims and their backgrounds, except where necessary for evidentiary purposes. I also intentionally did not include any theories as to why any individuals or agencies acted in any particular way or what their motives may or may not have been, including Daniel, investigators, accusers, jury members, and more. I wanted this article to be only about the facts and evidence as it existed at trial and was presented above the court. Theories are for another day and often biased for readers. This isn't my opinion, me, Shakaama. As you can probably tell, this is a racially charged case, but what people didn't know was Daniel is a Japanese man. He's not a white man. Black Lives Matter, in their mustering to take revenge against white cops, actually targeted a minority cop. How do you square that circle? And while most people who try to prove they're not racist say they have black friends, this Japanese man, who is surrounded by non-Japanese people, his best friend is actually a black man. That's the poignant irony of this entire thing. To add insult to injury, the first woman to kick this all off was found with drugs in her purse, and Daniel Holtzclaw let her go and didn't report her. Yeah, be sure to take that guy off the street. But we're going to believe an ex-felon crack whore who was literally high and driving. Oh, and forget that video evidence that says everything she said was a lie. Now, about that bet, you have to thumbs up the video for falling into my trap and share it on Twitter and donate to my fund on patreon.com/Shakaama. Thank you for watching.
Making our lives safer and easier. We are outraged that we are losing our privacy, yet continue to upload more of our personal info, which is sold to the highest bidder. For many people, Google and Facebook already know who your friends are, who you email, where you live, where you work, what books you read, what songs you listen to, what events you're going to, everything you search, every website you go to, and where you are right now. We are the transparent machines, generating billions of dollars for giant corporations from our private information.